The smell hit them first. Salty, smoky, rich. Something they had never encountered in 4 years of war rations. 19 Japanese women stood frozen at the entrance of the American mess tent, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, September 1945. They had been prisoners for 36 hours. They had been taught that capture meant torture, starvation, death. Instead, an American cook was frying bacon. And what happened when these women trained to die before surrender took their first bite would reveal a truth so powerful it would shatter propaganda that had controlled an entire nation. Only 1,100 Japanese women became prisoners of war during the entire Pacific conflict. Keiko Tanaka was one of them. She was 24 years old. She was a signals operator. She had been captured in Manila. And right now, standing at the threshold of that mess tent, she believed she had perhaps 3 more days to live. The expected timeline was simple: capture, interrogation, torture, death. But the smell coming from that tent did not smell like death. It smelled like something else entirely. It smelled like abundance. Keiko woke that morning in an American barracks tent, her second day of captivity. She had slept in a wool blanket, clean and warm, the first good sleep she had experienced in months. The razor blade was still hidden in her sock. She had moved it from her bra after yesterday's metal detector incident. Around her, 18 other women breathed in various stages of sleep. Some were crying softly. Some had finally surrendered to exhaustion. Morning sounds filtered through the canvas. American voices laughing about something. Truck engines growling to life. A radio playing music she did not recognize, something with horns and rhythm foreign and inexplicable. And underneath it all, that smell. Rich, fatty, smoky. Her stomach growled. She hated her body for betraying her like this. They were prisoners. They should be starving. That was what the propaganda had promised. The propaganda had been very specific. American prisoners of war ate scraps. They lived in filth. They were fed maggot-infested rice if they were fed anything at all. The officers had warned them during training. You will be starved to break your spirit. You will be violated to destroy your honor. You will beg for death before the end. But Keiko had not been starved yesterday. She had been given rice. Real rice. Short-grain sticky, prepared the way her mother used to prepare it. That alone had been impossible. And now this smell, this bacon smell, was suggesting something even more impossible. The tent flap opened. Lieutenant Helen Patterson stepped inside, 34 years old. Blonde hair pinned back under her, cap clipboard in hand, Red Cross armband visible on her sleeve. Behind her stood Michiko Hayashi, the translator. 27 second-generation Japanese-American. The woman the other prisoners called traitor in whispers. Michiko spoke in perfect Tokyo dialect. Breakfast in 20 minutes. Mess tent. Attendance required. The women stirred. Ayame. 19 years old, the youngest sat up with terror written across her face. It is a trap, she whispered. They will poison us. Reiko, 31, former army nurse, shook her head slowly. Why feed prisoners well? What do they want from us? Sumiko, 29, the highest ranking among them, spoke with barely controlled anger. We should refuse. Accepting enemy food is dishonor. But Keiko was thinking something different. We have to eat something. We are too weak to resist when they come for us. When, not if. When. 20 minutes later, they lined up outside the mess tent. The smell was overwhelming now. Bacon, yes, but also coffee, real coffee and toast and something else, something sweet. Keiko could see inside through the open flap. Dozens of metal trays, steam rising from food. American soldiers moving through a line, filling their plates, sitting at long tables, eating, laughing, normal. This was not what starvation looked like. Michiko gestured them forward. Lieutenant Patterson stood beside a large man in a white apron, Sergeant First Class Harold Williams, 45 years old, a Wisconsin dairy farmer before the war. He had been cooking for 3,000 soldiers daily since 1942. He looked at the 19 Japanese women with neither hostility nor pity. He looked at them the way he looked at everyone who entered his mess tent, as people who needed to eat. Patterson spoke through Michiko. You will go through the line like everyone else. Take a tray. The servers will give you food. Sit wherever you find space. Same food, same portions, same as American soldiers receive. Keiko did not believe this. It was not possible. But she picked up a metal tray anyway. It was clean. No rust, no dents. She moved through the line. A server, a young private who looked barely 18, placed items on her tray without making eye contact. 4 strips of bacon, crispy, glistening with fat. 2 fried eggs. Sunny side-up yolks, intact and golden. 2 slices of white toast, buttered. A cup of coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute they had been drinking for years. A small glass of orange juice. Fresh squeezed, impossible, from California oranges that should not exist in a prison camp. A bowl of oatmeal with brown sugar and raisins already mixed in. Keiko stared at her tray. The propaganda had promised 500 to 800 calories of rotten rice if they were lucky. This tray held perhaps 2,800 calories, more food than a Japanese soldier received in an entire day. And this was just breakfast. The women found seats at a long table. American soldiers sat nearby, eating the same food, talking about a baseball game, about letters from home, about nothing important. They glanced at the Japanese women occasionally, but without malice. Just curiosity, like seeing something unusual but not threatening. Sergeant David Brennan approached their table. He was 33 years old, Boston Irish Catholic, security chief at Camp McCoy. He had a story he carried with him, a weight visible in the way he held his shoulders. His younger brother Thomas had been killed at Iwo Jima 6 months earlier, February 19, 1945. Tom had been 22. His last letter to David had said, "Do not let this war make you cruel, Davy. Remember why we are fighting, to be better than them." Brennan sat down at the edge of their table. He picked up a strip of his own bacon. He ate it. Then he spoke and Machiko translated. Same food, same kitchen, not poisoned. The moment hung there. 19 women staring at trays of food. 1 American guard eating bacon to prove it was safe. The absurdity was so complete that Keiko almost laughed. Almost. She picked up a strip of bacon, held it to the light. The fat was translucent. The edges were crispy. Salt crystals were visible. In 4 years of war, she had never seen meat like this. Even the officers had not eaten this well. She took a bite. The texture hit first. Crispy. Not the chewy, gristly fat from military rations. This shattered between her teeth like thin glass. Salty, sweet, smoky. 3 flavors she did not know could exist together. Fat dissolved on her tongue, rich, coating. Nothing like the rancid oil they had cooked with in Manila. This was clean fat, fresh fat, American abundance concentrated in 4 strips of pork. She closed her eyes, chewed slowly. The salt made her eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. Her stomach growled again. This time she did not feel shame. She felt anger, anger that they had been told this did not exist. Anger that they had been taught America was starving, rationing, suffering like Japan. This bacon, casual, ordinary, given to prisoners without hesitation, this was what defeat tasted like. No, this was what their victory tasted like. And it tasted like they had never been hungry at all. Ayame watched Keiko eat. Then she took a bite of her own bacon. And she started crying. Not from fear, from grief. Grief for wasted terror. "We were going to kill ourselves over this," she whispered. Reiko ate the eggs. The yolk broke. Real butter taste. She cried silently, tears running down her face, mixing with egg yolk on her lips. Even Sumiko, hostile, defiant, angry at everything, ate. She ate because the alternative was starving, and starving would not change anything. 18 of the 19 women finished breakfast. Only Hana, 22, refused to eat. She would be a problem later. Sergeant Brennan watched them eat. He thought about Tom. "Tom, you were right. This is why we fight. Not to starve them, not to torture them, to feed them. To show them what civilization looks like. Even if they were our enemies 36 hours ago." Lieutenant Patterson approached with her clipboard. "Medical examinations start in 1 hour. We need to make sure you are all healthy enough to process." Keiko heard this through Machiko. Medical examinations. The words triggered something in her training. She remembered the propaganda films. American doctors experiment on prisoners. They measure bodies for medical torture. They select the healthiest for vivisection. But they had also said prisoners would be starved. And she had just eaten bacon. Real American bacon. 4 strips of it. So maybe the medical examinations were also a lie. Or maybe the kindness ended there. Maybe the bacon was just to fatten them up first. Make them compliant. Break down their defenses with food and warmth and clean blankets so that when the torture started, it would be more complete. The women returned to their barracks. The atmosphere had changed. Full stomachs changed perspective. Ayame spoke first, her voice small but wondering. My grandmother always said, trust people who share food without asking questions. Americans just did that. Reiko shook her head. It is strategy. They fatten us before interrogation, make us compliant. Keiko was thinking out loud. Maybe. But why give prisoners bacon? Why not rice gruel? Why treat us better than our own army treated us? She remembered Manila, August 1945, just weeks ago. Japanese military rations had consisted of moldy rice when it was available, pickled vegetables often rotting, no meat for 6 months. The officers ate separately better food, hoarded supplies, while enlisted soldiers starved. She had watched 3 women in her unit collapse from malnutrition in the final weeks before surrender. One had died. But here at Camp McCoy, Americans ate the same food as prisoners. They sat at the same tables. There was no hierarchy in meals. Sergeant Brennan had eaten bacon from the same batch cooked in the same kitchen, served by the same private. No separate officers' mess, no hoarded supplies, just food distributed equally according to rules. What kind of army does that, Keiko wondered. Michiko approached her as the women settled in. You have questions. I can see it. Keiko looked at the translator. This woman with the Japanese face and American uniform. This woman called traitor by both sides. Why bacon, she asked. Why not minimum rations? Michiko's expression was careful. Geneva Convention, Article 26. Prisoners of war receive daily rations sufficient in quantity, quality, and variety. United States Army interprets that as same as American soldiers receive. But your family, Keiko said, you said they are imprisoned. Michiko's face hardened. Yes, Manzanar internment camp. My parents, Japanese Americans, citizens, imprisoned since February 1942. They do not get bacon. They get canned vegetables and rationed rice. The paradox was suffocating. American citizens of Japanese descent imprisoned given minimal rations. Japanese enemy soldiers, prisoners of war, given full American breakfast. The contradiction made no sense. Unless both things could be true at once, unless America was capable of great mercy and great injustice simultaneously, unless the system was complicated in ways propaganda could never explain. Do not try to understand American logic, Michiko said quietly. Just survive it. An hour later, Lieutenant Patterson assembled the women outside the medical tent. She explained through Michiko. Standard examinations, height, weight, blood test, teeth check. I will be conducting them. Female only. Sergeant Brennan will be 50 meters away for security, but he will not enter. Keiko watched the first woman go in, a Kami 22, a logistics officer. She entered the tent terrified. 5 minutes later, she emerged confused. What happened? Ayame asked. Akemi blinked. Nothing. They checked my heart, my lungs, asked about childhood diseases. That is it. Nothing else. The nurse said I am underweight, asked what I normally eat, then said they would add extra portions to my meals until I gained 10 pounds. Keiko processed this information. Extra portions, not reduced rations as punishment, extra food as medical treatment, another impossibility. The line moved forward. Woman after woman entered terrified and emerged confused. When Keiko's name was called, she stepped forward, her heart pounding audibly in her chest. Inside the medical tent, everything was clean. The examination table was padded. Medical instruments were laid out in sterile order. There were no restraints, no guards inside, just Lieutenant Patterson and her medical equipment. Patterson gestured to the table. Please remove your jacket only. Everything else stays on. Keiko hesitated. The razor blade was in her sock, lower than yesterday. Harder to detect, easier to access if needed. Patterson held up a stethoscope. I will listen to your heart and lungs through your shirt. I will not open buttons. Is that okay? Is that okay? 3 words Keiko had never heard from an authority figure in her entire military service. In the Imperial Army, orders were absolute. Obedience was required. There was no okay. There was only compliance or punishment. Keiko removed her jacket, stood in her uniform blouse, arms wrapped around herself. Patterson approached but did not crowd her. The stethoscope touched Keiko's back cold through the fabric. "Deep breath, please." Keiko breathed. Her chest expanded. The razor blade shifted slightly against her ankle. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain Patterson could hear it through the instrument. Patterson nodded, heart rate elevated. Normal given circumstances. Given circumstances. She acknowledged their terror as expected, not shameful. This enemy nurse understood that 19 Japanese women prisoners were terrified, and she considered that normal, reasonable human. The examination continued. Blood pressure cuff on the arm, temperature under the tongue, eyes checked with a small light, reflexes tested with a rubber hammer on the knee. Nothing invasive, nothing violent, just medicine. Then Patterson frowned slightly, listening to Keiko's chest again. "You have a slight heart murmur. Did you have rheumatic fever as a child?" Keiko's mind went blank for a moment. Then she answered in Japanese and Machiko translated. "Yes, when I was 11. Patterson made a note. "We will monitor it. Not serious now, but you will need extra rest." Keiko stared at this woman, this American nurse who had just asked about her childhood illness, who cared about a heart murmur from 13 years ago, who was planning for Keiko to be alive and healthy in the future. Not interrogating, not exploiting medical information, just practicing medicine. The examination ended. Patterson looked at her clipboard. "You are malnourished but stable. We will increase your portions. Extra protein vitamins. You should gain 15 pounds over the next month." A month. She was planning for Keiko to be alive in a month, healthy, fed, gaining weight. Propaganda had said they would be dead in days. Keiko returned to the barracks in a daze. The other women looked at her with questions in their eyes. She could only shake her head. Medical exam, real medical exam, that is all. That night, Keiko lay awake in the darkness. The razor blade pressed against her ankle. 48 hours since capture. Still alive. Still unviolated. Still fed. Around her, the other women breathed in various stages of sleep. Ayame was wrapped in her American blanket, sleeping peacefully for perhaps the first time in months. Reiko was crying softly, but not from pain, from confusion, from the cognitive dissonance of expecting monsters and finding nurses. Sumiko lay awake staring at the canvas ceiling, her silence hostile and unresolved. Outside, American guards changed shifts, routine sounds, boots on gravel, voices exchanging brief words, a radio in the distance playing that same strange music horns and rhythm, and something that sounded almost like joy. Someone laughed, just a normal laugh, not cruel, not predatory, just tired men ending a shift grateful to be done with work. Keiko thought about the bacon, the way it had tasted, the way it had shattered her certainty. She thought about Patterson asking about her childhood fever, about Brennan eating bacon to prove it was not poisoned, about Machiko translating with precision, ensuring understanding, even when understanding was painful. The bacon was real. The coffee was real. The medical exam was real. The nurse who checked her childhood illness, that was real. What else had they lied about tomorrow was contraband inspection, metal detectors, body searches. The razor blade in her sock would be discovered. And when that happened, would the kindness end? Or was there something else? Something the propaganda had never prepared them for, waiting on the other side of that discovery. She did not sleep. She lay there in the darkness, holding on to the memory of bacon, the taste of truth, wondering if truth was enough to keep her alive, wondering if she wanted to be alive if it meant believing everything she had been taught was a lie. The moon tracked slowly across the sky. The tent canvas glowed silver in places where the seams were loose. 19 women breathed. 18 of them had eaten American bacon that morning. 18 of them had taken the first step away from propaganda and towards something else. Something without a name yet. Something that tasted like salt and smoke and the terrifying possibility of mercy. One razor blade waited in the darkness. One more day until discovery. One more test of whether enemies could choose to be something other than cruel. And somewhere in the darkness, Keiko made a decision. She would not use the blade tonight. She would wait. She would see what happened when they found it. She would test this new truth against the old lies. And if the lies won, if the torture came, if the propaganda was correct after all, well, the blade would still be there. But for now, for one more night, she would choose to wait. She would choose the terrifying uncertainty of hope over the comfortable certainty of death, because the bacon had been real. And if the bacon was real, maybe other impossible things were real too. Maybe mercy was real. Maybe rules that protected even enemies were real. Maybe civilization was real, and maybe it tasted like salt and smoke and butter melting on morning toast. She closed her eyes. Thought of her father in Hiroshima, his fate unknown since August 6th. Thought of her mother dead in the bombing of Tokyo 1944. Thought of her younger brother killed at Saipan, the reason she had joined the army in the first place. Thought of her younger sister Hanako, somewhere in Japan, probably hungry, probably scared, probably believing her older sister was dead. I am alive, she thought. I am alive and I ate bacon and a nurse checked my heart, and tomorrow they will find my razor blade, and I will see if this is real or if this is just a different kind of cruelty. But tonight I am alive, and that has to mean something. The razor blade pressed yelled against her ankle, waiting, patient, ready if needed, but not needed yet. Not tonight. Morning came too quickly. Keiko woke to sunlight filtering through canvas, her third day as a prisoner, and the razor blade was still there, cold metal against her skin, a promise she had not yet kept. The women around her stirred slowly. Ayame sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Reiko was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her cot, staring at her hands. Sumiko stood by the tent entrance, arms folded, watching the camp come to life, with the expression of someone waiting for betrayal. Michiko appeared at the tent flap. Contraband inspection this morning, after breakfast. Sergeant Brennan will supervise. Lieutenant Patterson and I will conduct the searches. Female only. You will line up outside the processing tent at 0900 hours. The words landed like stones in water. Ripples of fear spread through the tent. Keiko felt her throat tighten. This was it. The moment the kindness would end. The moment they would discover what she was hiding. The moment the bacon and the medical exams and the clean blankets would be revealed as an elaborate setup, a way to lower their defenses before the real punishment began. Breakfast was quiet. The bacon smelled the same, tasted the same, but Keiko could barely eat. Her stomach was a knot of anticipation. Across the table, Ayame picked at her eggs, tears already forming. Reiko ate mechanically, her face blank. Only Sumiko ate with something like satisfaction, as if the coming inspection confirmed everything she had been saying. See, they were only kind while it served them. Now comes the truth. At 08:55:19, women lined up outside the processing tent. The morning air was cool. September in Wisconsin. Keiko could see her breath. She could also see Sergeant Brennan standing 20 meters away, hands behind his back, watching but not approaching. His presence was meant to be supervisory, non-threatening. A man keeping his distance while women conducted searches on women. Patterson and Michiko stood at the tent entrance. Patterson held a metal detector, the same device from the first day. The device that hummed instead of hurt. The device that had been the first impossible thing. Patterson spoke through Michiko. This is standard procedure. We will check each of you for contraband. Razor blades, glass shards, anything you might use to harm yourselves. You are not in trouble for possessing these items. We know why you have them. We know what you were taught, but we cannot allow you to hurt yourselves, so we check. We confiscate. We document. That is all. The first woman stepped forward. Etsuko 26, a supply officer from Saipan. Arms out, metal detector passed over her body. It hummed steadily. No beep. Pat down over clothing, quick and professional. Remove your shoes, please. Etsuko complied. Patterson checked the shoes. Nothing. Socks. Nothing. Back in line. 3 minutes total. The second woman. Same procedure. Nothing found. Third woman. Fourth woman. The line moved steadily. Women entered the process terrified and emerged confused. Again. The same pattern. Fear followed by bewilderment, followed by the slow grinding realization that maybe, just maybe, the propaganda had been wrong about this too. Keiko was fifth in line. She watched each woman ahead of her, counted the seconds, rehearsed what would happen. The detector would not catch the blade in her sock. It was too low outside the initial sweep, but the shoe inspection would reveal it, and then everything would change. Her turn. She stepped forward, arms out, heart hammering. The metal detector passed over her torso. Steady hum. No beep. Patterson's hands performed the pat down. Shoulders, arms, waist, hips. Professional. Quick. Not lingering. Not invasive. Please remove your shoes. Keiko's throat closed. Her feet would not move. She stood there, frozen, while Machiko and Patterson waited. Machiko's eyes narrowed slightly. She had seen this before. She knew what hesitation meant. Is something wrong? Keiko had a choice. She could run. Futile but possible. She could refuse. Invite punishment. Or she could comply. She could test whether the bacon had been real, whether the mercy extended beyond food and medicine to this moment, to this discovery, to this reckoning. Slowly she bent down, removed her left shoe, then her right. The razor blade sat against her ankle. Visible, obvious, undeniable. Patterson picked up the right shoe, tipped it over. The blade clattered onto the wooden floor. Silence. Keiko waited for the beating, for the shouting, for the punishment that any officer in the Imperial Army would have delivered without hesitation. She had hidden contraband. She had lied by omission. She deserved to be struck down. Patterson picked up the razor blade with 2 fingers, held it up to the light, studied it. Her expression was not anger. It was not even disappointment. It was something closer to sadness. She spoke and Machiko translated. 47 blades confiscated this week. You are not alone. You are not in trouble. Patterson walked to a metal container sitting on a nearby table. She opened it. Inside were dozens of razor blades. Different sizes, different levels of rust, different hiding places implied by different shapes. 47 women who had carried the same insurance policy. 47 women who had believed death was preferable to whatever came next. Patterson dropped Keiko's blade into the container. The sound it made was small, insignificant. One more piece of metal among many. She turned back to Keiko. We are not going to hurt you. We know what you were taught. We know why you hid this. It is over now. Keiko's legs gave out. She did not fall. Machiko caught her, steadied her, helped her stand. And for the first time since capture, for the first time in 4 years of war, Keiko cried without fear. Not relief, not gratitude, just confusion. Pure, overwhelming confusion. Everything she believed about enemies, about capture, about honor and death, and the only acceptable response to defeat, all of it shattered by 4 words. You are not in trouble. Ayame, watching from the line, whispered in Japanese. She was forgiven. She hid a weapon and she was forgiven. The line continued. 2 more blades were found. Same response each time. No anger, no punishment, just confiscation and a statement. You are not alone. You are not in trouble. When the inspection ended, 16 of 19 women had been searched. 3 had possessed razor blades. All 3 were told the same thing. All 3 returned to the barracks without bruises, without shouting, without the violence they had been taught was inevitable. Sergeant Brennan watched from his position 20 meters away. 47 razor blades confiscated this week. 47 women convinced by propaganda that death was preferable to mercy. Tom's words echoed, "Do not let this war make you cruel." How did the enemy convince them of that? How did propaganda become so powerful that suicide seemed rational? And how do we prove it was a lie? Keep feeding them. Keep treating them. Keep following the rules even when it would be easier not to. Keep being the country Tom believed in. 3 weeks passed. The routine of camp life settled over them like morning frost. Predictable, unavoidable, strangely comforting in its consistency. 0700 hours. Breakfast, bacon, some days pancakes, others sometimes eggs and hash browns, always coffee, always orange juice, always more food than seemed possible for prisoners to receive. 0900 hours. Exercise yard, supervised but not restricted. The women walked in circles, talked in small groups, slowly remembered how to exist without immediate threat. 1200 hours. Lunch. Sandwiches thick with meat and cheese. Soup. Fruit. Apples that tasted like they had been picked yesterday, not stored for months in a warehouse. 1400 hours. Recreation. This was the strangest part. Recreation. For prisoners. Corporal Jensen, 22 years old, bored with the guard duty, had started teaching them poker. He used buttons for chips, explained the rules slowly through Machiko. Ayame won consistently. She had a gift for reading faces, for calculating odds, for bluffing with complete sincerity. For the first time since capture, she was good at something. Better than the Americans. Better than the other women. Winning gave her something she had not felt in years. Agency, 1,800 hours. Dinner, full meals. Meatloaf, one night fried chicken, another roast beef, pork chops, always vegetables, always bread, always dessert. Pie or cake or cookies, sugar and butter in abundance that should not exist in wartime. 2,100 hours, lights out, sleep. Then wake and do it again. In the second week during a heat wave, Mess Sergeant Williams brought a wooden crate to the barracks. Inside were glass bottles green beaded with condensation. Coca-Cola. He spoke no Japanese, but Machiko translated. Heat wave special. Cold drinks for everyone. Ayame took a bottle, stared at it, opened it. The carbonation hissed. She took a sip. Her eyes went wide. A my sweet tingly. The bubbles were foreign. Carbonation was not common in Japanese soft drinks. This sensation, this aggressive sweetness, this cold liquid that seemed to bite back, this was America in a bottle. Casual luxury. Given to prisoners. Without ceremony. Without kanamis. New clothes arrived in the first week. American Red Cross uniforms. Clean. No holes. Proper fit. Undergarments included. This was significant. Dignity restored through fabric, through elastic that had not worn out, through cloth that did not smell like four other women who had worn it before. Ayame held a pair of new socks in her hands and cried. Mine, she whispered. These are mine. Not shared, not borrowed. Mine. Hot showers were available daily. Indoor plumbing, unlimited hot water. Soap provided Ivory brand white bars that smelled clean without the harshness of lye. Keiko's first hot shower lasted 20 minutes. She stood under the water feeling 6 months of grime and fear wash away and thought I forgot what clean felt like. In the third week, American guards played baseball in the adjacent field. The sounds drifted across the camp. The crack of bat hitting ball, shouting, cheering, laughter. The sport was foreign, the rules incomprehensible, but the joy was universal. Men playing a game. Taking pleasure in something that did not involve war or death or duty. Just play. Reiko watched through the fence. In the Imperial Army, officers did not play. They maintained dignity. They preserved hierarchy. But here officers and enlisted men played together, took turns at bat, argued about rules with something that looked like friendship. What kind of army is this? Reiko asked no one in particular. Week 4 brought crisis. Yuki was 20 years old. The quietest of the 19 women. She had spoken perhaps a dozen words since capture. On the morning of day 24, she started coughing. By afternoon, the cough was wet and deep. By evening, she was burning with fever. Lieutenant Patterson performed an examination. Temperature, 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Chest pain, difficulty breathing, pneumonia, potentially fatal, especially in a malnourished patient, especially without modern medicine. Patterson made a decision. She set up a quarantine tent, started intravenous fluids, and then she walked to the medical supply office to request penicillin. Captain Morrison was 48 years old. West Point graduate, by the book bureaucrat. He looked at Patterson's requisition form and shook his head. Request denied. Penicillin is reserved for American personnel, not authorized for enemy prisoners. Patterson's voice was calm but firm. Geneva Convention Article 15 mandates equal medical treatment. Morrison's voice was equally firm. Convention does not specify newest drugs. Give her sulfa. That is sufficient. Sulfa will not work fast enough. She is 20 years old. She will die. Morrison met her eyes. Not my problem, Lieutenant. Save the penicillin for our boys. Patterson left his office, walked directly to the camp commander's headquarters, requested immediate meeting with Colonel William Hayes. Hayes was 52, career officer, Pacific Theater veteran. He had seen things that made him value rules more than convenience. Patterson presented her case. Hayes listened. Then he reviewed the Geneva Convention text, checked Army medical directives, made a decision. Lieutenant Patterson is correct. Article 15 is explicit. Treat her. Morrison, who had followed Patterson to object, started to protest. Sir, we have limited supplies. This is an enemy prisoner we cannot justify. Hayes cut him off. We have enough, and more importantly, we have rules. We follow them even when inconvenient, especially when inconvenient. That is what separates us from them. Request approved. Keiko overheard this exchange. Michiko was translating quietly for her. Keiko's mind spun. They argued about saving Yuki, and the rules won. The commander chose to save an enemy prisoner not because he liked her, not because he felt pity, but because the system required it. What kind of enemy has a system like that? Patterson administered the first dose of penicillin that evening. Injection every 4 hours, around the clock. She set up a cot beside Yuki's quarantine tent, slept in a chair between doses, monitored vitals personally. This was beyond duty requirements. This was choice. Day 1, Yuki's fever climbed to 104 degrees. She was delirious, speaking in fragments, calling for her mother, reliving battles that had already ended. Day 2, the fever broke slightly, 101 degrees. Breathing came easier. The wet sound in her lungs began to clear. Day 3, Yuki woke lucid, looked around the tent, saw Patterson dozing in the chair beside her, whispered in Japanese, "Am I alive?" Patterson woke, smiled tiredly. Michiko, who had been translating for the medical updates, repeated the question in English. "Yes," Patterson said, "you are going to be fine." Yuki's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why save me? Because that is what doctors do. That is what the rules say. That is what is right. Reiko watched this entire episode from outside the quarantine tent. She had been an army nurse. She had seen how the Imperial Army treated medical care. Officers hoarded medicine. Enlisted soldiers died of treatable infections. There was no penicillin for anyone below officer rank. Resources were scarce, so they were preserved for those who mattered. The expendable were allowed to die. But here, an American nurse had fought her own supply. Officer appealed to the camp commander and won the right to use scarce medicine on a Japanese prisoner. An enemy. Someone who 3 weeks ago might have been trying to kill American soldiers. Reiko's worldview cracked. Our army said sacrifice was honor. Their army says saving lives is duty. Which one is actually honorable? She did not have an answer, but she knew which system had kept Yuki alive. On the night of day 31, Sumiko stood up in the barracks. She had been silent for days, watching, calculating, growing angrier with each act of American kindness. Now she spoke. "Listen, everyone. We have become weak. We accept enemy blankets, eat their bacon, let them inject us with chemicals. This is not how Japanese soldiers behave." The women turned to look at her. Some faces showed agreement. Most showed exhaustion. Sumiko continued. "Yuki should have refused the penicillin. Honorable death is better than enemy debt. We are prisoners who forgot how to be prisoners. We eat better than our families in Japan. This is shame. When the war ends, when we return home, Japan will punish collaborators. They will call us traitors. America no Inu. America's dogs. And they will be right." Ayame, who had found her voice through winning at poker, spoke quietly. "Sumiko-san, they have not hurt us. Not once. They gave us bacon. What are we betraying by staying alive?" Sumiko's voice was sharp with contempt. "Survival is not honor." Keiko stood. She had been waiting for this confrontation. She had known it was coming. Sumiko represented everything they had been taught. Death before dishonor. Loyalty above life. The code that had nearly made Keiko use the razor blade. "I had a razor blade," Keiko said. Her voice carried across the tent. "I was going to use it." Patterson took it and said, "You are not in trouble." That is when I knew. She stepped towards Sumiko, not aggressive, just present. Everything we were taught was designed to make us kill ourselves before we learned the truth. The truth is, they have rules. They follow them even when it costs them. They argued about saving Yuki, and the rules won. Not mercy, not kindness. Rules, system, civilization. Keiko's voice strengthened. "You call this weakness, I call it civilization." Our army said sacrifice was honor. Their army says protecting life is duty. I know which one I believe now. Sumiko's face twisted with rage. "You are no longer Japanese." Keiko met her eyes. No, I am still Japanese, but I do not believe lies anymore. The tent divided. 15 women moved toward Keiko's side of the tent. 4 remained with Sumiko. The split was not dramatic. No one shouted, no one fought. It was just a quiet realignment of belief, a recognition that maybe survival was not betrayal, maybe learning was not weakness. Maybe the enemy had something to teach. Sumiko stared at the 15 women who had chosen Keiko. Then she lay down on her cot, turned her face to the canvas wall, and said nothing more. 3 days later, Hannah disappeared. Evening count, 18 women present. 1 missing. Hana, 22 years old, one of Sumiko's 4 gone. Sirens, searchlights, camp lockdown. All prisoners confined to barracks. Brennan organized a search patrol. Perimeter secured. Dogs brought in. Wisconsin woods in October were dangerous. Temperature dropping to 40 degrees at night. No food, no water, no map, no plan. Keiko sat in the barracks with the others, heart pounding. This changes everything. This is collective punishment. Reduced rations. Harsher treatment. Proof we cannot be trusted. 2 hours later they found her, 1.2 miles from camp. Hypothermic, disoriented, sitting against a tree sobbing. When the patrol approached, she did not run. She just looked up and said in broken English, "I could not even escape properly." They brought her back to the medical tent. Patterson examined her. Mild hypothermia, exhaustion, no injuries. Wrapped her in blankets, gave her hot tea, waited for Colonel Hayes. Hayes arrived without ceremony. He pulled up a chair, sat down at Hannah's level, asked through Machiko, "Why did you run?" Hannah cried as she answered, "You are too kind. I do not know how to be a prisoner here. I was taught you would hurt me." "You have not. That is confusing. I needed to reject it, to prove I was still loyal, to prove I was still Japanese. But I could not even run properly. I am a failure at everything." Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke and Machiko translated carefully. "You are scared. That is understandable. You were taught we would hurt you. We have not. That is confusing. I understand, but running into Wisconsin woods at night, that is dangerous. You could have died." He leaned forward slightly. "You will be monitored more closely. We will check on you more often, but you are not going to be punished. You are not in trouble. You are safe." Keiko, watching from outside the medical tent, felt her mind break again. The Imperial Army executed escape attempts. Summary execution, no trial, just punishment as deterrent. But Hayes responded with concern for safety, with increased supervision, not decreased humanity, with acknowledgement that confusion was reasonable. Hannah broke down completely. She cried in Patterson's arms, not from gratitude, from grief. Grief for wasted terror. Grief for 4 years spent believing lies. Grief for nearly dying in the woods because she could not accept that the enemy was not who she had been told they were. Patterson held her. Maternal without being condescending. Human without being weak. Just a nurse holding a patient who needed to be held. The impact rippled through the remaining prisoners. Sumiko's faction fractured. 2 of her 4 defected to Keiko's group. Only Sumiko and 1 other woman remained hardline. 18 women had learned that even rebellion met with mercy, that even attempted escape resulted in concern rather than punishment, that the system held even when tested. On day 43, Machiko received a letter. Mail call happened twice a week. Red Cross facilitated letters between Japan and America, though the process was slow, and many letters never arrived. Most of the women received nothing. Tokyo was bombed. Communications were disrupted. Families were displaced or dead. Keiko received nothing. Her father in Hiroshima, his fate unknown since August 6th. Her mother confirmed dead in Tokyo bombing 1944. Her younger sister Hanako somewhere in Japan, probably believing Keiko was dead. But Machiko received an envelope. Return address, Manzanar, California. She stared at it for a full minute before her hands started shaking. She ran into the barracks crying. First time the women had seen her vulnerable. A letter came, she said in Japanese, forgetting to maintain translator distance. A letter came. All 19 women gathered, even Sumiko, drawn by the raw emotion in Machiko's voice. Machiko opened the envelope with trembling fingers. 2 pages, handwritten Japanese characters. her mother's handwriting. She read aloud, voice breaking. My dearest Michiko, your father and I received your letter from August. We are so relieved you are safe. Manzanar is difficult. Desert heat in summer, freezing cold at night. Dust storms cover everything. We live in tar paper barracks, 6 families to a room. But we are surviving. Your father teaches calligraphy to the children here. It gives them something beautiful to focus on. I help in the medical clinic. My English nursing training is finally useful. Michiko paused, wiping her eyes. Continued reading. We heard you are translating for Japanese prisoners. Some people here do not understand. They call you traitor. But we know better. We are proud of you. You are serving the most vulnerable, those who have no voice. That is the highest calling. The war is over now. They say we will be released soon. We have nowhere to go. Our home was sold, our business liquidated. But we will rebuild. Stay strong, my daughter. What you do matters. With love, mother. Silence filled the tent. Then Keiko spoke. 120,000 Japanese Americans were interned. Executive Order 9066, February 1942. 0 were charged with espionage or treason. Not 1. German Americans walked free. Italian Americans walked free. Only Japanese faces were locked away. She looked at Michiko. Your parents, citizens imprisoned. Us, enemies given bacon. Both things are true. Both things are America. Michiko nodded slowly. Do not try to understand it. Just survive it. That is what I do every day. Keiko watched Michiko clutch the letter to her chest. This woman, parents imprisoned by the country she serves, called traitor by both sides, still shows up daily, still translates accurately, still treats Japanese prisoners with dignity. This is what honor looks like when everything else is complicated. That night, Keiko asked Patterson for paper and pen. Patterson provided them without question. Keiko sat on her cot and wrote, not a suicide note, a letter, to her younger sister Hanako in Tokyo. She wrote about the blanket Ayami kept wrapped around her shoulders, about Reiko's dental work completed in week 5 cavities, filled in infection, treated medical care, given without hesitation, about rice that tasted like home, about bacon that changed everything, about Yuki alive because of penicillin and rules that mattered more than convenience, about enemies who asked permission before searching you. The final paragraph took her 30 minutes to write. Hanako, what we were taught was a lie. Americans are not monsters. They have rules, real rules that protect even enemies. I do not know if this letter will reach you. I do not know if I will survive to see peace, but if I do, I will spend my life telling this truth. Propaganda's greatest weapon is making you kill yourself before you learn you were lied to. I almost died believing lies. I am alive now because I learned truth. And truth tastes like bacon and sounds like rules and feels like a nurse who fights to save her enemy because the system says she must. If you receive this, know that I lived, know that I learned, know that everything we believe was wrong in the most important way. Our enemies were more honorable than our propaganda. She signed her name, folded the letter, gave it to Patterson to mail. Patterson took it with a small nod, promised to try. Postal services between Japan and America were still disrupted. The letter might never arrive, but trying mattered. Patterson took the letter, put it in her desk drawer, made a note to send it when postal services resumed. She did not know it would sit in that drawer for 53 years, undelivered but not forgotten. Because sometimes the most important messages are not the ones that arrive. They are the ones that prove you were brave enough to send them. The women settled into sleep that night with something new in their hearts. Not quite hope, not yet trust, but the beginning of understanding. The recognition that maybe, just maybe, the world was more complicated than propaganda. That enemies could have honor. That systems mattered more than individuals. That civilization was not perfection, but the choice repeated daily to follow rules even when breaking them would be easier. Keiko lay in darkness, the absence of the razor blade strange against her ankle. She thought about bacon, about penicillin, about 47 blades in a metal container, about Michiko's parents in Manzanar, about Patterson fighting Captain Morrison, about Hayes choosing rules over convenience, about Brennan keeping his distance so women could feel safe. She thought about truth, how it tasted, how it felt, how it changed everything. Tomorrow was uncertain. Repatriation would come eventually. Return to Japan, facing family, facing accusations, facing a country that would call them traitors for surviving with dignity. But tonight they were alive, fed, safe, learning. And that had to be enough. December 1945, San Francisco Harbor. The USS General John Pope sat heavy in the water-gray steel against gray sky, preparing to carry 866 Japanese prisoners of war back across the Pacific, back to a Japan that no longer existed in the form they remembered, back to atomic shadows and occupied cities, and a nation that would not know what to do with survivors who had learned uncomfortable truths. Keiko stood on the dock, her small canvas bag holding everything she owned. 2 American Red Cross uniforms, clean undergarments, a wool blanket she had been allowed to keep, and folded carefully in the inner pocket a letter she had written but never sent. The letter Patterson had promised to mail, but could not. Postal services, still disrupted, infrastructure, still broken. Patterson had returned it that morning, said, "Keep it. Maybe someday you can deliver it yourself." The dock was chaos. Prisoners boarding, MPs checking manifests, families of American soldiers crowding nearby piers waiting for their own reunions. And standing separate from the crowd, 3 Americans who had taken leave to see them off. Lieutenant Patterson, 34, blonde hair, loose for once, no longer in uniform, but in a simple dress, civilian clothes that made her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. Sergeant Brennan, 33, in his dress uniform, ribbons on his chest, eyes that still carried the weight of Iwo Jima, but also something softer now, something that looked like peace earned. And Machiko, 27, in her Miss uniform, standing between 2 worlds as she always had, belonging fully to neither, essential to both. Patterson approached Keiko, held out an envelope. "Your letter, the one to your sister." She spoke and Machiko translated unnecessarily because Keiko had learned enough English in 3 months to understand. "Postal services are still disrupted. I could not mail it. But keep it. Maybe someday you can deliver it yourself." Keiko took the envelope, bowed deeply. "Arigato gozaimasu, Patterson-san." Patterson did something unexpected. She bowed back. Not a casual nod, a proper bow, respectful, acknowledging equal humanity. Then she said through Machiko, "Ganbatte kudasai." "Please persevere. You have survived the hardest part. Now survive the peace." Brennan stepped forward. He had been quiet through the farewell. Now he spoke, voice rough with something that might have been emotion. "Ma'am Keiko-san, I need you to know. My brother Tom was killed at Iwo Jima. February 19th, he was 22. I could have made your time at Camp McCoy hell. I thought about it. Every day, for the first week, I thought about it." Machiko translated carefully. Brennan continued. "But Tom's last letter said, 'Do not let this war make you cruel.' So I followed the rules. I watched Lieutenant Patterson fight for you, and I am grateful I did, because you taught me what my brother died for. Not to defeat Japan, to prove our system was worth preserving." He saluted. Proper military salute, full honor. Prisoners of war did not merit salutes, but Brennan gave one anyway. Keiko returned the salute. Clumsy, unpracticed, but sincere. Then she said in careful English, "Your brother, he was right. You proved he was right." Ayame stood beside Keiko wearing the American issue coat she had been allowed to keep. In her pocket was a piece of paper with an address. Corporal Jensen, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The poker teacher. The board guard who had given her agency through card games. She had asked Machiko to write the address in English. Pen pal, maybe. Someday. The idea was absurd and hopeful in equal measure. The ship's horn sounded. Boarding call. Time to leave. 19 women walked up the gangplank. Keiko looked back once. Saw Patterson wiping her eyes. Saw Brennan standing at attention. Saw Machiko raising one hand in farewell. Her face composed, but her shoulders shaking slightly. The American coastline receded. Keiko stood on deck, watching it disappear into winter fog. Beside her, Reiko spoke quietly. "I learned something here. Patterson was right about medicine. Saving lives is more important than preserving honor. I do not know if Japan will let me practice that kind of medicine, but I learned it. That has to matter." Ayame on Keiko's other side pulled her coat tighter. "I am not the same person who arrived. I was terrified of everything. Now I know what I am capable of. I can win at poker. I can survive confusion. I can learn that enemies are not always who you are told they are. Jensen-san said I was good at cards. No one ever told me I was good at anything before. The ship turned west, toward Japan, toward whatever came next. 14 days at sea, 14 days to prepare for a homecoming that would not feel like home. January 1946, Yokohama port. The city was skeletal. Firebombing had left buildings standing like burned teeth. The harbor smelled of ash and salt and the particular emptiness of a place where too many people had died too quickly. American flags flew over occupied Japan. MPs checked papers. Red Cross stations distributed food. Everything moved with the organized chaos of an empire dismantled and remade. Keiko searched for family news at the Red Cross station. A woman with tired eyes checked lists. Father school teacher, Hiroshima. The woman's face said everything. I am sorry. Hiroshima was destroyed August 6th. Very few survivors. If you have not heard from him by now, you should assume the worst. Mother Tokyo died 1944 air raid. Keiko already knew this, had known for over a year. But hearing it confirmed again still hurt. Younger sister Hanako Tanaka evacuated to countryside. The woman checked another list. Found in Nagano Prefecture. Working in textile mill. Alive. Here's the address. Keiko took the paper with shaking hands. Hanako was alive, 16 years old now, working in a factory. Alive. It took 3 days to reach Nagano. Trains still running but on reduced schedules. The countryside was better than the cities. Less bombing, more food. But still the poverty was visible. Thin faces, worn clothes. The exhaustion of a nation that had lost everything and did not yet know how to rebuild. The textile mill was a long wooden building surrounded by dormitories. Keiko asked for Hanako Tanaka. A supervisor pointed to a girl at a loom. Thin, gray uniform, hair tied back. Hands moving mechanically, practiced numbed by repetition. Keiko approached, stood there until Hanako looked up. Recognition was not immediate. Then Hanako's eyes widened. The shuttle dropped from her hands. One-chan, ikite ita, sister, you were alive. They embraced, both crying, both shaking, both changed in ways that would take years to understand. That night in the dormitory, Keiko showed Hanako the letter, the one she had written at Camp McCoy, the one Patterson had returned. Read it, Keiko said. Hanako read. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something harder. When she finished, she looked up. Are you a collaborator? The word landed like a stone. Collaborator. Traitor. America no Inu, America's dog. The accusation Keiko had known was coming, but still hurt to hear from her own sister's mouth. I survived, Keiko said quietly. I ate food they gave me. I accepted medical care. I learned they were not going to kill me. If that makes me a collaborator, then yes, I am a collaborator. But I prefer to think of it as learning truth. Hanako's face was torn. Neighbors are talking. They say her returned prisoners are contaminated. That you cannot be trusted, that you were broken by the enemy. Employers will not hire you. People will not speak to you. If I am seen with you, I will lose my job. Keiko nodded slowly. I understand. I will not put you at risk, but I will not lie about what I experienced. The Americans fed us bacon. They gave us penicillin. They followed rules even when it cost them. That is truth. Propaganda was the lie. I do not know what to believe, Hanako whispered. Everything is broken. Nothing makes sense anymore. Then we will be broken together, Keiko said, and maybe someday sense will return. March 1946, Tokyo. War crimes trials. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East was beginning its work, prosecuting Japanese war criminals, establishing accountability, rewriting history in real time. And in the chaos of testimony and evidence and legal frameworks, a complaint was filed. Sumiko filed it. He filed it. She accused Keiko and 14 others of collaboration with the enemy, accepting preferential treatment, betraying the emperor, forgetting Bushido. The complaint demanded investigation, possible prosecution punishment for surviving and incorrectly. Keiko was summoned to testify, not as a witness for the prosecution, as the accused. The courtroom was a study in contradictions. Japanese officials conducting the inquiry under American supervision, Occupation authorities observing, legal frameworks that did not quite fit the situation, and Michiko Hayashi there as translator for the U.S. observation team, seeing Keiko again for the first time since San Francisco. A Japanese prosecutor asked the questions. Did you cooperate with American captors? I accepted medical treatment. I ate food they provided. I followed their rules. Did you provide information about Imperial Army operations? None. They never asked. They only asked about my health. Did you accept enemy ideology? I accepted that they were not going to kill me. Is that ideology? The prosecutor's voice hardened. You betrayed the emperor by surviving comfortably while Japan suffered. Keiko stood. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it during the long voyage home. I was taught Americans would torture and rape prisoners. They did not. I was taught we should die before capture. They prevented our suicides. I was taught enemies have no honor. They fought their own officers to save a dying prisoner with medicine. I did not collaborate. I learned. She continued, voice steady. You want to prosecute survival, then prosecute this. 94% of Japanese prisoners of war survived American custody. 67% of American prisoners of war survived ours. Which side lacked honor? The courtroom erupted, shouting, arguments, chaos. The American observers took notes, including a written affidavit from Lieutenant Helen Patterson describing Camp McCoy protocols, Geneva Convention compliance medical treatments provided. The ruling came 3 days later. All charges dropped. Not because Keiko had proved innocence, but because SCAP's Supreme Commander Allied Powers, the Occupation Authority, intervened. Ruling stated prisoners of war cannot be prosecuted for accepting Geneva Convention compliant treatment. Dismissed. But the damage was done. Keiko was marked. America no Inu. Her name was in newspapers. Her face was known. Employers would not hire her. Landlords would not rent to her. Hanako faced harassment at her textile mill, pressured to disown her sister. She refused, but the cost was visible. Ayame's parents disowned her completely. The arranged marriage merchant was still waiting, they said. If she returned and married him, she could be forgiven. Ayame declined, wrote to Corporal Jensen instead. Asked if he knew how to emigrate to America. Knew it was impossible, asked anyway. Reiko was denied her nursing license. The medical board cited collaboration suspicions. She appealed, was denied again. Eventually found work as a clerk in a hospital, not using her medical training, but near medicine. Close enough to remember what Patterson had taught her. The 1950s passed slowly. Keiko worked in menial jobs, factory seamstress, night janitor, anything that did not require references or background checks. She lived in a small apartment with Hanako, who had become a school teacher despite the stigma. They did not speak about Camp McCoy often. The silence was safer. Letters arrived occasionally from Michiko in Los Angeles. Her parents had been released from Manzanar in 1946. Lost everything. Home sold, business liquidated, savings confiscated. They rebuilt slowly. Her father's calligraphy business found clients in the Japanese American community. Her mother worked as a nurse. They survived. Barely, but they survived. Michiko became an advocate, worked with other former internees, started organizing, demanding recognition, demanding justice. The letters described this work with quiet determination. They took everything from us, but they cannot take our truth. We will make them acknowledge what they did, even if it takes 50 years. In 1952, a letter arrived from Ayame. She had emigrated to the United States. The process had taken 6 years. She had married Thomas Chen, a Chinese-American translator she met during the occupation. He had been in Miss like Michiko, worked in the same unit. They bonded over being wrong kind of Asian in everyone's eyes. Japanese-American, Chinese-American, both marginal, both suspect, both surviving in the spaces between. The letter described San Francisco, described freedom, described having 3 children who would never know propaganda. Keiko-san watashi wa jiu desu. I am free. Come visit someday. America is complicated, but it is not what we were taught. You were right about that. You were right about everything. Keiko read the letter alone, cried alone, wrote back with congratulations, did not mention that she could never visit, could never afford passage, could never obtain the necessary papers. America no Inu could not return to America even if she wanted to. 1978 brought a new wound. Sumiko published a memoir, True Account of American Captivity. It describes psychological torture, forced labor, humiliation, cultural destruction. It mentioned nothing about bacon penicillin, Geneva Convention compliance, or the 47 razor blades confiscated without punishment. The book became a minor bestseller, fit perfectly into nationalist narratives about Japanese suffering, American cruelty, the need to remember history correctly. Keiko read it, felt rage building, wrote her own rebuttal. 12,000 words describing what actually happened. The breakfast, the medical care, Patterson fighting Morrison, Hayes choosing rules over convenience, Yuki surviving because the system required saving her. She submitted it to 3 publishers, all rejected it. Too controversial. Contradicts accepted narratives. Japanese people do not want to hear that American prison camps were humane. It complicates the victim narrative. Thank you, but no. Keiko put the manuscript in a drawer, next to the unsent letter to Hanako. Both truths that could not find an audience. 1988 changed something. The United States government passed the Civil Liberties Act. Formal apology for internment of Japanese Americans. $20,000 redress payment per survivor. 43 years late, many internees had died waiting. But recognition came. Justice delayed but finally acknowledged. Michiko's parents received their payment. Her father was 85. Her mother was 82. The money could not buy back 43 years, could not restore the home, the business, the life they had built before Executive Order 9066. But the apology mattered. The recognition mattered. Michiko wrote to Keiko, "Justice delayed but acknowledged. Maybe someday your truth will be acknowledged too. Do not give up." Keiko was 67 years old. Hanako was 59. Both of them worn by decades of silence. But Michiko's letter sparked something. A small flame of possibility. Maybe. Someday. Maybe. 1995 brought the catalyst. The 50th anniversary of World War II's end. Museums planning exhibitions. Historians writing retrospectives. Veterans sharing stories. And in this moment of remembering, a researcher from University of California, Berkeley, contacted Keiko. His name was Dr. Robert Fletcher. He was writing a book. The other prisoners, Japanese POWs in American custody. He had found her name in Camp McCoy records. Could she speak with him? Hanako, now 65, said, "Stop, you will be hurt again." But Keiko agreed, one condition. Find the others. Find Camp McCoy survivors. Fletcher found them. 14 women still alive from the original 19. 5 had died. Old age, illness, the slow attrition of time. But 14 remained. Michiko Hayashi, 68, retired. Los Angeles. Spent 40 years advocating for redress. Saw her parents receive justice before they died. Helen Patterson, 84, retired nurse. Portland, Oregon. Widowed. 3 children. 7 grandchildren. Still kept the box of razor blade photographs. Still remembered their names. David Brennan, 83, retired security consultant. Boston. Never married. Tom's letters framed on his wall. Still thought about Iwo Jima. Still believed he made the right choice. Ayame Chen, 69, San Francisco, married to Thomas Chen, 53 years, 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren. The youngest born 70 years after Camp McCoy. 70 years of life that propaganda tried to prevent. Reiko Yamamoto, 79, Tokyo. Eventually became a licensed nurse in 1965 after laws changed. Published 14 papers on medical ethics and war trauma. Spent her career arguing that Patterson's approach was correct, that saving lives mattered more than preserving honor through sacrifice. Sumiko refused contact. Still angry, still certain, still insisting her version was truth. Fletcher arranged a conference call. Multiple time zones. Translators. Technology that would have seemed impossible in 1945. Keiko picked up the phone in her small Tokyo apartment, heard Patterson's voice for the first time in 50 years. Patterson spoke first. "Keiko-san, I kept your letter." "What?" "The letter to your sister. You gave it to me to mail December 1945. I kept it. I still have it." Keiko's hand tightened on the phone. Why? Because it was proof. Proof that you survived more than captivity. You survived propaganda, and I wanted to remember that. I wanted to remember what we did right. Michiko was on the line as well, translating, her voice older but still precise. Fletcher had found her first, brought her into the project as consultant in bridge. She said, "We are going to tell the story correctly. All of us together. Will you help?" Keiko looked at Hanako across the small apartment. Hanako nodded slowly. "Tell it. Tell the truth. Even if no one wants to hear it. Tell it anyway." "Yes," Keiko said. "I will help." November 1998. Tokyo War Museum. The exhibition was titled Pacific War POWs Untold Stories. Dr. Fletcher's research had been published to critical acclaim. The museum invited survivors for a panel discussion. 200 people registered. The venue was changed to accommodate 300. Day of the event, 350 showed up. Historians, students, veterans. Journalists, NHK Broadcasting Live. 14 women sat in the front row. Camp McCoy survivors. Average age 75, 53 years removed from the bacon breakfast, the razor blade confiscation, the pneumonia crisis, the failed escape, 53 years of carrying truth that no one wanted to hear. Helen Patterson sat in a wheelchair, 87 years old. She had flown from Oregon specifically for this, 16 hours, at her age, because it mattered, because these women mattered. David Brennan sat beside her, 86, flew from Boston, wore his dress uniform, ribbons on his chest, Tom's Purple Heart pinned beside his own decorations, because Tom was there too, in spirit, in the choice to be merciful when vengeance would have been easier. Ayame Chen sat with her family. Husband Thomas, 79, still sharp, still translating when needed. 3 children in their 40s and 50s. 7 grandchildren, teenagers, and young adults. 4 great-grandchildren. The youngest, 5 years old, Emma, holding her great-grandmother's hand, not understanding why everyone kept crying. Michiko Hayashi sat in her wheelchair, 80 years old, frail, but present. Beside her, a photograph of her parents, both deceased. Father died 2005. Mother died 2007. Both lived to see redress. Both lived long enough to tell their daughter, "You were right to translate." Those women deserved accuracy. The panel began. Dr. Fletcher moderated, explained the historical context. 1,100 Japanese women captured during Pacific War. 98.7% survival rate. Lowest suicide rate of any Japanese prisoner group. Geneva Convention compliance. Medical Directive 1944. B. The systematic humanity that propaganda never prepared anyone for. Then Keiko stood. 77 years old, gray hair pinned back, hands steady on the microphone. In front of her on the podium, a photograph. Not the blade itself. She had surrendered that 53 years ago. But a photograph. The one she had secretly taken from Patterson's office before leaving Camp McCoy. The image of her razor blade. The weapon that was never needed. She spoke in Japanese. Michiko translated to English. NHK broadcast both. "This was mine. I hid it in my bra, then my sock. I planned to use it on myself." The audience was silent. "I was taught capture meant violation, torture, death. I was taught that Americans were monsters." Her eyes found Patterson in the audience. Patterson was crying. Already, before the story had really begun. But before the razor blade, before the medical exam, before any of that. They gave us bacon for breakfast. A ripple of surprise through the audience. Bacon. The detail was too mundane, too specific, too real. Not torture, not cruelty. Bacon. They gave us bacon that first morning. The kind of abundance we had never seen. Even our officers never ate that well. And they shared it with us at the same tables. That single breakfast shattered 4 years of propaganda. She continued. The propaganda was the weapon. Not guns, not bombs. Propaganda, making us so afraid of truth that we would kill ourselves before learning it. 47 of us hid razor blades. 47 of us planned to, rather than risk learning our enemies were human. Keiko set the photograph on the podium. "I kept this for 53 years. Not the blade. The photograph. Because I needed to remember what I almost did. And I needed to remember who stopped me." She looked at Patterson. "Lieutenant Patterson took my razor blade and said, 'You are not in trouble.' Those words saved my life. not because they were kind, because they were true. The system protected me even though I was the enemy, even though I had hidden a weapon, even though I had planned to use it. The system said, "We will not hurt you," and the system meant it. Statistical reveal. Keiko spoke the numbers slowly. Of 1,100 Japanese women captured during Pacific War, 98.7% survived American custody. Suicide rate after processing 0.2%, lowest of any Japanese prisoner group. The protocol worked. The humanity worked. Not because Americans were individually kind, though many were, because the system required it, because rules mattered more than convenience. She continued, "I spent 60 years believing I was captured by enemies. I was wrong. I was captured by a system that valued life over victory, a system that said saving Yuki with penicillin was required even though it was expensive, a system that said Hana would not be punished for escape attempt because she was scared, and scared people deserve understanding. A system that said bacon for prisoners was not mercy, it was compliance with Geneva Convention Article 26. Keiko's voice cracked. The weapon was never the blade. The weapon was the lie that I needed it. And the antidote was bacon and penicillin and rules that applied to everyone. Michiko reached up from her wheelchair. Keiko took her hand, both women crying now. "Thank you for the bacon. Thank you for the rules. Thank you for proving propaganda wrong. Thank you for 53 years of life I would not have had if I had believed the lies." Standing ovation. All 350 people on their feet. Patterson sobbing. Brennan saluting. Ayame's 7 grandchildren clapping, not fully understanding, but recognizing this was important. Emma, 5 years old, asking her mother, "Why is everyone crying?" And her mother answering, "Because great-grandma is brave." After the panel, a private room. Keiko Patterson, Michiko Ayame, Brennan Reiko. 6 people who had changed each other's lives 53 years ago, who had proved that systems could be humane, that enemies could learn, that propaganda could be defeated by bacon and penicillin, and rules faithfully followed. Patterson reached into her bag, pulled out a yellowed envelope. Keiko's letter, the one from December 1945, the one that had sat in Patterson's desk drawer for 53 years. "I brought this for you." Keiko took it with shaking hands, opened it, read her own handwriting from age 24. The part she remembered. "They gave us blankets, cooked our rice, asked permission. What we were taught was a lie." Then the second page. The part she did not remember writing. The part where the pen ran out mid-sentence. "Hanako, if I survive and return to Japan, I do not know what I will find. But I know this. The world is more complicated than propaganda. Enemies can show mercy. Civilization is not about perfection. It is about building systems that work even when people fail. And sometimes the enemy is not the one holding the gun. It is the one who convinced you to hold it to yourself." The words stopped there. Incomplete. Unfinished. But enough. "You kept this," Keiko whispered. 53 years. Patterson nodded. It was proof. Proof the system worked. Proof that following rules saves lives. Proof that you were never really my enemy. You were just someone who had been lied to. And when you learned truth, you wrote it down. That mattered. Brennan spoke. His voice was rough with age and emotion. "Ma'am, Keiko-san, Tom would have loved this. He always said we were not fighting to destroy Japan. We were fighting to show them there was a better way. You proved he was right. Your survival, your learning, your 53 years of carrying truth that no one wanted to hear. That is what he died for. Thank you for honoring that." He saluted again. Proper military salute. And this time Keiko's return salute was not clumsy. 53 years had taught her what it meant. Respect between former enemies. Recognition of shared humanity. Acknowledgement that the war had ended, but the learning continued. Ayami pulled out a photograph. Her 7 grandchildren. Emma in front, gap-toothed smile holding a toy. "This is why I stayed in America. Why I married Thomas. Why I refused to come back to Japan permanently. Because I wanted my children and their children to grow up in a place where the bacon was real. Where systems protected even the vulnerable. Where rules mattered." She looked at Keiko. "You taught me that survival is not betrayal, that learning is not weakness, that the enemy can teach you truth. I have spent 53 years being free because you helped me understand freedom is choosing truth over comfortable lies. Machiko spoke from her wheelchair. My parents died believing I did the right thing, translating for you, serving the vulnerable. They lived to see redress, saw the government admit internment was wrong. That mattered. But what mattered more was knowing I helped you survive, helped you learn truth, helped build bridge between enemy and enemy until neither word made sense anymore. She smiled tiredly. I am 80 years old. I do not have much time left. But I am grateful I lived long enough to see this, to see you tell the truth publicly, to see Patterson return the letter, to see Brennan honor his brother's memory, to see Ayame's grandchildren proof that propaganda did not win. That evening in the museum garden, 5 elderly people sat together under Tokyo stars. Keiko 77, Patterson 87, Machiko 80, Brennan 86, Ayame 69. Patterson opened a box. Inside were 47 photographs, each one showing a razor blade. Different size, different conditions, different stories, but all the same in one way. All weapons that were never needed. She handed the box to Keiko. This belongs in the museum, with your blade. So people understand this was not just your story. This was 1,100 women who were taught death was preferable to truth. 98.7% chose to learn instead. That is not about American kindness. That is about systems that choose humanity over hatred, and survivors who choose to speak even 60 years later. Keiko accepted the box, held it carefully. Inside were 47 photographs of weapons that were never used. 47 women who waited just long enough to learn that the bacon was real, that the penicillin was real, that the mercy was systematic, not individual, that civilization was possible even between enemies. I will make sure these are displayed correctly, she said, with the full truth, what propaganda from either side. Just what happened. Bacon and razor blades and rules that saved lives. They sat in silence as night fell. 5 people who had been changed by war, by propaganda, by the decision to follow rules even when breaking them, would have been easier by the choice to learn, even when learning meant admitting you had been lied to. The museum would open the full exhibition the next day. The razor blade photographs, the letters, the testimony, Dr. Fletcher's research, Patterson's medical records, Brennan's service file with Tom's last letter, Machiko's translation notes, Ayame's poker chips from Camp McCoy kept as souvenir, Reiko's medical ethics papers, 14 stories of survival through systematic humanity, and at the center, one photograph of one razor blade with a placard written collectively by survivors. The weapon that was never needed, 1945, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. This razor blade represents the gap between fear and reality. Its owner, 24-year-old Japanese signals operator, hid it to escape torture that never came. When discovered, she was told, "You are not in trouble." Those words ended a war that propaganda had started in her mind. She did not need the blade. None of us did. What we needed was bacon and penicillin and rules that protected even enemies. 47 blades were confiscated that week. 47 lives were saved, not by kindness, by system, by the choice repeated daily to value life over victory. 98.7% of us survived to tell this truth. This is our weapon against propaganda, not courage. Patience, the willingness to wait and see if your enemy is who you were told. We waited, we learned, we survived. And 53 years later, we teach. The weapon was never the blade. It was the line that you needed it. The exhibition would run for 6 months, 30,000 visitors, international coverage, textbooks revised, history rewritten not to favor one side but to complicate both sides to show that humanity could survive, even in war, that systems mattered more than individuals, that enemies could learn from each other if propaganda did not kill them first. Keiko Tanaka died in 2007, age 86. Her funeral was attended by 200 people. Hanako, Machiko, who flew from Los Angeles despite her health. Ayame, who brought Emma, now 14, to pay respects to the woman who taught her great-grandmother that survival was not betrayal. And Dr. Fletcher, who had helped finally tell the story that needed telling. Patterson died in 2004, age 93. 47 former Camp McCoy POWs attended her Portland funeral, some from Japan, some across America, to thank the nurse who fought for penicillin and proved that protecting life mattered more than punishing enemies. Brennan died in 2008, aged 96. Tom's letters were donated to the World War II Museum. His service file included a note in his own handwriting. Served at Camp McCoy, 1945. Supervised Japanese POW security. Learned from Lieutenant Patterson and 19 Japanese women that my brother was right. Mercy is not weakness. System is not tyranny. Following rules even when hard is what separates civilization from chaos. Tom died for that. I lived to prove it. Machiko died in 2011, age 83. Her obituary mentioned her advocacy work, her translation service, her parents' internment and redress in one specific line. She served the most vulnerable by ensuring accuracy between languages, between enemies, between versions of truth. She chose bridge over weapon. That choice saved lives. Ayame died in 2015, age 86. She left 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren. Emma spoke at her funeral, said great-grandma taught me that propaganda is defeated not by anger, but by living fully, by choosing truth over comfort, by raising children who will never hide razor blades because they will never be taught to fear learning. Reiko died in 2009, aged 92. Her final paper published posthumously was titled What Patterson Taught Me Medical Ethics in War. It argued that the systematic protection of enemy life through resource allocation protocol compliance and bureaucratic resistance to expedience was not mercy but justice, and justice properly administered saves more lives than medicine alone ever could. The Tokyo War Museum exhibition became permanent in 2012. The razor blade photographs, the letters, the testimony, and now new additions, obituaries of the women who survived, photographs of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, proof that systematic humanity had defeated propaganda not just in 1945, but across 70 years and 4 generations. Emma Chen, 14 years old in 2007, grew up to become a historian, specialized in Pacific War POW treatment, wrote her dissertation on Geneva Convention compliance and survival rates, cited her great-grandmother Ayame throughout. The acknowledgments page thanked Keiko Tanaka, Helen Patterson, David Brennan, Machiko Hayashi, and all 1,100 Japanese women POWs who proved that enemies could learn from each other if given bacon and rules instead of torture and hatred. The final display in the Tokyo War Museum is a photograph, not of a razor blade, of 5 elderly people sitting together in a garden. Keiko Patterson, Machiko Brennan Ayame. Taken November 1998. They are not smiling for the camera. They are looking at each other. Seeing across 53 years to the moment when bacon changed everything, when rules saved lives, when enemies learned that the weapon that was never needed was never the blade. It was the lie that convinced you to hold it to yourself. And the antidote was truth. Complicated, uncomfortable, systematic truth. The kind that tastes like bacon and sounds like rules, and feels like a nurse fighting her supply officer because the system requires saving life, even enemy life, even when it costs more than convenient. That truth survived 1,100 women, 98.7% of them. Survived 53 years of silence. Survived propaganda from both sides. Survived into testimony and exhibition in textbooks in the memories of grandchildren who never knew war but learned its lessons anyway. The weapon that was never needed was never the blade. It was always the lie. And the women who survived to tell this truth defeated that lie simply by living, learning, and refusing to let propaganda have the final word.